All right, guys, we are going to move into keeping the main thing the main thing. And check it out. We didn't do a big idea this week because we are going to spend an entire large segment. We're going to chop this up into, it'll still be 2 10-minute segments, but we're going to spend both of those segments where we usually would have done the big idea and keep it the main thing. We are going to be talking about what is going on in the Middle East right now. So boom, here we go. We're going to hit it hard and heavy. This is coming from some feedback that I've gotten from some of my friends, some of you guys asking, what are we watching happening in the Middle East right now? You guys know that I don't talk about things from like military operations or foreign policy standpoint. But that being said, there is the conflict that's going on in Israel right now. And I've been getting lots of questions. What are we seeing? What is this? Does it represent end-time prophecy? Should I be concerned? Should I start heading for the hills? Should I start learning to garden? Well, the answer to those last two is possibly yes.
Absolutely yes.
But
Absolutely. Has nothing to do with that over there. You need to learn to garden.
So that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about this week. And lucky for you guys, I am a unconventional warfare specialist, but that's not going to be helping us right now. But we do have a biblical scholar, and what did you call yourself earlier today? An arbiter of truth? An arbiter of truth that has spent much of his life studying exactly this. So without further ado, Pastor Eric, would you please walk us through what we are seeing in the Middle East? Israel is pushing into the Gaza Strip. They're calling it ground operations, not an invasion.
Right.
And tell us what we are seeing through a biblical lens, through what Scripture says about end-time prophecy.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Let's start from the end and let's work backwards.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
always the easiest way to do a puzzle.
It is, especially a maze. And when you're looking at prophecy, scripture, it's a maze, and there will always be a portion of the prophecy that we'll never understand. It's meant to be a mystery, and people need to know this right out of the chute. There are things that you will see. It's meant for our ears to pick up. It's meant for our eyes to see. It's meant to have understanding. In fact, Jesus even said, when you see these things, lift up your head and look, for your redemption draweth nigh. That means it's near. Mm-hmm. Nigh, I quoted
or
it out
in Matthew chapter 24, he talks about, wars, seeing wars, rumors of wars and all these things. But these things must happen. They're the beginning of the birthing pains.
Because it's birthing pains, and then correct. It will come. And so notice that there's always a distinction, that there still is some distance between when you see these things and when the thing actually happens. So the whole point that God and Jesus says this himself, no man knows the hour. But what Jesus does is gives us pictures so that we understand this didn't take God by surprise, so it shouldn't take us by surprise. These are the things that are going to happen. God said that they would happen. God is still in control. We call this the doctrine of the sovereignty of God. He is in control. He is using these things to bring about his purpose. So he either does them or he allows them to happen. It may not be in his nature, but to do that, he doesn't do evil things, but he allows evil things to happen to bring about his purpose. So these are concepts that we need to have understanding of, so that we're not blaming God wrongly. Oh God, why did you do this evil? God doesn't do evil. However, when it is part of his justice that evil will bring forth a certain fruit, he wants that to happen, and so he'll take his hands off and let evil do its thing. It still works for God's purpose. So those are concepts of the things that God does. So let's work backwards. There are some things that will have to happen first before we hit end times thing. A big thing that has to happen is there has to be a third temple built. Correct. Because many things will happen and they will happen in the temple, we're told. So there needs to be a third temple built. So, but let me tell you how close we are to having a third temple. We have, you can go look this stuff up. People are free. Jump on YouTube. In fact, it's absolutely fascinating that we have this. But we have what is known as a Temple Institute. It has actually been here for a very long time. And a Temple Institute, what it does is it has come about in order for the temple to be built. There's things that have to go into the temple. And so the one thing is they have to bring together the priesthood. Mm-hmm. The priesthood has been scattered. The priesthood has to be brought back together. The priesthood has to be taught how to be priestly since they've been scattered.
And if I can just interject for just a second, anybody that doesn't really understand what we're talking about, in the city of Jerusalem, which is the cultural center for the Jewish nation, right, of Israel. This is their traditional capital city of the nation. It goes back thousands of years. There's a very holy site culturally to the Jews where their temple, the temple to God, was built. The Jewish nation has always wanted to get their hands back on it.
There were two of them.
However, the Arab people that had the land that Jerusalem sits on prior to 1948, prior to the reinstating of the nation of Israel, still maintain control of that site in Jerusalem because they actually have a mosque that sits there now, which is an abomination to the Jewish faith. But I'm not going to get into all that. But right now, the Arab people control that site. They have just as much wrapped up into not wanting the Jewish nation to get a hold of it to rebuild a Jewish temple on the site. So it's a very hot, contested political thing that's going on right there to catch anybody up to understand.
Okay. So, and that's what we're talking about is the temple. There were actually two of them. One was built in the time just after King David in the time of Solomon, approximately 3,000 years ago. It was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, who was a Persian or modern day Iran. Mm-hmm. And came in and took Israel up and out of the land. They dislocated all the people except for the Mame, and some women and children at the time were left in the land. 70 years later, they came back into the land, and part of coming back into the land, they rebuilt it. It was not nearly as grand as it was under King Solomon, but they rebuilt the temple. It was destroyed a second time in 70 AD by the Romans. General Titus was the name. In fact, the last battle that he had was with the Maccabees, was actually on the Temple Mount. He lost a couple of hundred soldiers in that highly contested battle. But General Titus was so angry with the Jews and what they had done at that time, rising up and trying to bring about an insurrection of the Romans that occupied the land, that he was so angry afterwards that the temple was not, according to the historian Josephus, not only was it destroyed and burned, but he literally plowed it down to the level of the road. And that's really important to know, because when Jesus was alive, he walked past it and he said, I want to tell you guys something. See this temple here? There will be a time that not one stone will be upon another for this temple. And so Josephus says, and I have seen a picture, it's hard to get a hold of, but it's out there, a picture in the late 1800s, somewhere around 1870, 1890, that somebody took looking into the city of Jerusalem and where the temple should be. You couldn't tell because literally it slopes down, and there is a scripture in Zechariah that says that they literally will be planting fields where the temple is. And sure enough, in that picture, it looks like a sloping garden for that mount where the temple was, which makes it highly contestable that where the west wall is actually the temple. But tradition says that it is.
Tradition. Name that reference.
Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah. Appropriate, right?
And so, but there is going to be a third one. So if by mistake tradition has the mount there, and if they could really identify where the temple really was, and there are things in the Bible that can do that, there is a possibility that you could leave the mosque where it is and still rebuild the temple next to it.
You know, if they build on these Abraham Accords and things move forward and continued peace in the land. Tell you what,
So
that's where we're gonna hold up for this segment, guys. Please stick around for part 2, keeping the main thing this week. Apocalypse Now, end of days. Have we reached it? What are we seeing in the Middle East through a biblical lens? Part 1 that we talked about here was maybe not quite there just yet, because we still have to have a rebuilding of the third temple, which hasn't begun yet. Keep your eyes glued, though. Pay attention to what happens in Jerusalem. So come back and hit it, and make sure you're checking in on part 2 so that we can move forward and catch the rest of what Pastor Eric's got for us. Please leave a thumbs up. Make sure that you like. Make sure that you give it a follow. Subscribe. And please share the video with a friend, because your guys' support is the only way the channel is going to grow. See you guys on part 2.